Hey friends, Elizabeth here from Plant-Based Bride, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the books that I read in July and the books I'm planning on reading in August. Before we hop into it, I just want to let you know that July was a bit of a weird month for me. It was just very overwhelming. I definitely still read quite a bit, don't get me wrong, but I was feeling a bit stressed in addition to the other stressors in my life in July because I felt like I was falling behind on my reading, and I had to pause and remind myself that there is no hard deadline for finishing these books. I can push books back to another month, or I can just shelve them for a while and come back to them later. I don't have to make my reading this all or nothing, super intense challenge for myself. It's supposed to be fun. So I tried to take a step back and just allow myself to be a little slower and take some days off from reading this month. So for that reason, I just wanted to start off by letting you know which books I'm not going to be discussing in this video. So these are the books that I wanted to read in July. Some of them, these ones I had started in previous months and pulled forward into July in the hopes of finishing them. And these books were new picks for July. So out of all these books, these are the ones I started but didn't quite finish, so I'm going to be pushing them forward into August. And these books I didn't manage to start, so I'm also going to be shifting those forward into August. So in this video, I'm going to be discussing these books, which are the books I actually finished in July. So the first book I finished in July was Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This story focuses on Binti, who is the first of her people to be offered acceptance at Uzma University, and the journey she takes traveling from her homeworld across space on a transport to start her post-secondary education, and what happens along the way. So I gave this book 4 stars. I thought Binti was really, really well done. Honestly, I think the missing star really comes from just how short it is, though I really do feel like so much was done in this tiny little book. There were moments that felt rushed or parts that I wanted to be more developed that there just wasn't room for. So for me, that kind of pulled me out of it, just those little sections where maybe a character recovered from something traumatic a little too quickly to be believed, or a relationship evolved and changed really rapidly, or societies changed, with a snap of a finger. Those things definitely felt like they needed a little bit more time and weight behind them, and maybe it would have been possible if the pacing were a little different in the novella, but honestly, I think this is probably just a result of how short this book really is. I thought the world building was amazing. I thought the alien species were really, really interesting, unique, and creative. I've mentioned this before, but I love when aliens in sci-fi are really interesting, both in their physiology and their culture. Too often aliens are basically just humans, but they have pointy ears, or they're green, but their culture is basically the same, and their understanding of language and relationships is the same. And I found these aliens really interesting because their culture was so different and their physiology was just completely different from humans, and that brought a whole other level of immersion to the story for me, and it's just interesting. I mean, if I'm gonna read about aliens, I want to read about something that's alien to me, not something that's familiar enough that it could have easily just been a human without anything really changing about the story. I felt really connected to Binti by the end of the story, so I'm really excited to know that there are more books in the series because I'm going to be gobbling those up very soon. The next book I read in July was Devolution, a first-hand account of the Rainier Sasquatch Massacre by Max Brooks. This story is told through the journals of one of our main characters who is in a small community separated from the rest of the world when a natural disaster strikes, and they are faced with trying to survive on their own with the added danger of the discovery of Sasquatch living in the woods surrounding their community. I gave this book 4 stars. I found it very intriguing, very enthralling. I don't think I've ever read a book about Bigfoot or Sasquatch. At first, I wasn't really sure about this one. I was given this book as a free listening copy from Libro FM as part of their influencer program, and I downloaded it without really being sure if it was something I was going to be interested in, but honestly, it really, really intrigued me. There were some pretty creepy parts. There is definitely some gore in there. Some really sad things happen, very intense, and overall, I really enjoyed it. Honestly, I think it's a really interesting thought experiment to envision a world where we have another species of apes that have evolved parallel to human beings, to Homo sapiens, and that they have hidden themselves from us as a way to survive, since Homo sapiens have managed to kill off every other human species that has existed. So this idea of, a species that could be considered a cousin to human beings, maybe our closest relative in the natural world, that have hidden themselves away because they're intelligent enough to recognize what a threat human beings are and what happens when they are brought face to face and required to interact due to a natural disaster. This was very fast-paced. The audiobook is amazing. There are so many incredible actors on this list of vocal talent for the audiobook, including Kei Miller, which, as y'all know, I'm a Star Trek nerd. I was gonna say fan, but really nerd. And Kei Miller plays Captain Janeway on Voyager. And she has a very short but still impactful cameo, and as soon as I heard her voice, I did a double take and thought, nope, that's Captain Janeway. What is Captain Janeway doing in this story? What is going on? And I ran to my husband and played it for him and was like, hey, hear it. He wasn't nearly as excited as I was, but I was pretty excited. But outside of Kei Miller, there are also many other people you'll recognize, like Nathan Fillion, among others. Amazing audiobook production on this one. And it's super fast-paced, very scary at parts. As I said, it's gory. There's definitely a horror aspect to this, so keep that in mind. But yeah, honestly, I was very pleasantly surprised by this book. I did not think I would enjoy it as much as I did, but it was a solid 4-star listen for me. Next up in July, I read Migrations by Charlotte McConaghy. This is a science fiction novel that focuses on basically our current world, just a tiny bit in the future, where climate change has continued to worsen and most of the animals on Earth have gone extinct. And in this novel, we follow one specific woman who is trying to follow Arctic terns on their migration and just delves more into that journey, into the state of the world, into her history. And this is another one that I got from Libro FM as a audio listening copy, and this is one that I was really excited about. I felt like this was so up my alley. I was really interested in reading about a vision of our world in the not too distant future if we don't clean up our act and take care of the planet in the way that is required. And that section of the book really did resonate with me. It was very difficult to read and very sad to read about all of the animals that have gone extinct due to humans mishandling our resources and irresponsible hunting and fishing, poaching, destruction of natural habitats, all of those things, which are things that I am, very passionate about as someone who has been vegan for 7+ years, primarily for ethical reasons and, being worried about animals. And that part of the book definitely resonated with me, and like I said, was very hard to read. But everything else kind of didn't work for me. To be honest, was kind of let down by this book. When I finished it and I rated it, I gave it 3 stars, and I struggle with that. I kind of feel like I should have given it 2 stars because the world building and the climate change aspect for me was really incredibly well done, but I could not connect to our main character at all. I found her so incredibly unlikable. I found her motivations confusing. I couldn't get behind her decisions or her justifications for the things she'd done. She also didn't seem to be human. And for a little while there, I thought that that was a metaphor, that the author was going to kind of tie this in with everything at the end, and there were references to her, being a wild thing, and that was something that came down in her line. And I thought that was going to kind of weave into the story of losing the wild aspect of our planet and colonizing our planet and destroying all traces of wild life. But that didn't really come to fruition for me, and it just felt like a weird loose thread and almost like an excuse, like that person in your life who's really toxic to everyone around them, just really awful, and when they're confronted about it, they come up with some really obscure random excuse for why they're an awful human being. And that's what it felt like this was. Franny was awful, and the reason was because wildness runs in her family. But that's not a justification for treating your husband and other people in your life terribly. So I don't know. I did enjoy the sort of atmospheric, melancholic writing style, but like I said, so much of this story is focused on Franny, specifically her journey, her history, her life, and I just didn't find her compelling, and I didn't like spending time with her. So for that reason, this book wasn't my jam. So the next book I read in July was The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune. And this was a young adult LGBTQ plus romance with a touch of fantasy or sci-fi in there because there are superheroes. This is a really sweet friends to lovers MLM romance with high school age kids. And I'm not particularly into superheroes. I'm not big on Marvel movies. I don't read superhero comics. I don't really get into it. So that aspect of it kind of turned me off at first when I was considering reading this, but it was actually handled in a really tongue-in-cheek way, and I appreciated that. It was sort of laughing at itself and acknowledging how silly superheroes can be. It didn't take itself too seriously, so I really appreciated that. It had some really great representation as well, with our protagonist who has ADHD and is dealing with some complex trauma from the loss of a parent, dealing with anxiety, panic attacks, and presumably PTSD. Overall, I just thought it was really sweet, really silly, really fun with some great representation, so I give it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I finished in July was Me and White Supremacy by Layla F. Saad. This book is really interesting in the way it's structured. It is sort of a workbook or a set of journaling prompts. So each chapter touches on a different aspect of white supremacy and modern day racism. So there are chapters on tone policing and white fragility and tokenism. So each chapter will explain what that concept is and give examples, and then we'll go into a section with journaling prompts so that you can ask yourself those questions and take the time to journal and think about how this aspect of white supremacy lives in you and in your life. Just overall, I think the structure of this book really lends itself to a lot of self-reflection and growth, which I think is so important for those of us with white privilege right now. So I would highly recommend this book if you haven't picked it up already. A lot of books that I have read so far on anti-racism tend to be a little bit more dense, a little more academic, which is obviously still important. But this book is very simplified and straightforward and really gets you involved and engaged. And I think that's really important right now. So 5 stars to Me and White Supremacy. I highly recommend it. The next book I finished in July was Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. And this one makes me really sad to talk about because I had such high hopes for this book. A number of people whose reviews I really trust, whose opinions I trust, have mentioned this book as one of their favorites, if not their absolute favorite book that they've read in a long time. And I just had such high hopes for it, and it really didn't work for me. And obviously these are just my opinions. I'm one person, and many people seem to have loved this book and it really resonated with them. So please don't take my negative review as an indication that you shouldn't pick up this book, because clearly it means a lot to a lot of people. But it just wasn't for me, and I gave it 1 star. I don't want to get too far into it because I think a lot of aspects of this book could be considered a spoiler, but I will say that it's just very dark. I will list all of the trigger warnings that I can think of on the book card that I pop up on the screen, but there are a lot of trigger warnings. It is a very dark story. And the biggest issue for me was that the majority of the chapters are narrated by one of the spirits in Ada's mind. This is not a spoiler, this is in the description of the book, that she has multiple spirits living within her. And this one spirit is so malicious and just revels in the pain and torment of everyone around her. And she uses Ada's body to do so many destructive things that really hurt Ada. And it just was really not enjoyable to read. And obviously not every book has to be enjoyable, but I just felt like there wasn't really a message. It just felt like a very upsetting story about a woman who was a victim of not only people outside of herself, but also of her own mind. There was nothing positive about it. There was nothing uplifting. There didn't seem to be a larger message. It was just very dark and painful to read. And I found myself getting really angry at this one spirit in particular and being frustrated that so much of the narrative came through her perspective. and wanted to hear more from Ada and wanted to see more of who Ada really was, because she really wasn't that developed as a character. And part of that is that so much of the story is told in a very bullet point kind of way. It was very much telling, not showing. And the only character that was really developed was this nefarious, malicious spirit who I just could not stand. So for me, this book was a miss. It just didn't work for me at all. I really struggled to get through it. It really left me in a not great place. Reading this book is part of why I struggled so much with reading in July, because I wanted to finish it, but every time I picked it up, it just made me not want to read it all for at least a couple days to kind of recover. It made me not want to read anything. So take that how you will. It really didn't work for me, but it has an average rating of more than 4 stars on Goodreads. There are many, many glowing reviews. So again, it clearly works for lots of people. Just please check out the trigger warnings before you read this book. Again, they're on the book card that I pop on the screen, because I wish that I had done a better job of searching out the trigger warnings ahead of time. And if I had done that and seen a complete list, I maybe would have skipped this one and avoided reading something I really didn't enjoy. The next book I read in July was Augustown by Kei Miller. This was our book club selection for my book club that I host on Patreon. You can check out a link down below if you're interested in joining our book club. But this was our selection for July, and I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. This is an example of a book similar to Freshwater, where a lot of not so great things happen, and there's a lot of dark subject matter, and it's painful to read, but there's also a glimmer of hope. It feels like there's a larger purpose to the story, and the characters feel real, and you connect to them and you care about them, and that makes it worth reading. And that's what I was really missing from Freshwater. So Augustown is about the town called Augustown in Jamaica, and specifically focuses on Matafi, her niece Gina, and Gina's son Kaya. And it jumps between the present and the past in the form of stories being told about various members of the community and how they relate to the present day and sort of the main event of the story, and talks quite a bit about class divisions and race divisions in Jamaica. Colonialism and racism are big factors of the story, as well as exploring Rastafarianism, how it came to be as a religion, and the disdain that is held towards the Rastafari by those of other religions in Jamaica. It was a really, sorry, I finished this last night, and it was a very emotional end of the story, and it really got me. But it was just a really beautiful story, and I felt like I learned so much in reading it. I felt like my eyes were opened to a culture and a community and a world that I haven't been able to see. Sorry, I cry really easily, but it was just really beautifully done. I want to read everything Kei Miller has written now. The writing style was incredible. The language, it was written in this Jamaican dialect and really transported you to Augustown, to Jamaica, and oh god, it was just incredible. It was a really amazing book. As I said, I just finished it last night, pretty late, so I don't know that I have the most complex, well thought out final thoughts on this, but basically what I'm saying is read this book, please. It is incredible. It is so incredible. 5 stars for sure. So the last book I read in July was Policing Black Lives: State Violence in Canada from Slavery to Present by Robyn Maynard. This book I actually finished today while getting ready to film this video, so it's still very fresh in my mind. This is a dense book. There is a lot in this book. There's a lot of history covered in this book, as well as present day discrimination through systems that have been built into how our country functions. And I just think this is a book that every Canadian should read, because we as Canadians have this problem where we like to think that we have no issues with racism, or at least our issues are, so negligible when compared to the United States, so we really don't have to worry. We are truly multicultural. We appreciate all Canadians no matter where they're from, and we really don't struggle with systemic racism in the same way as other places do. And that is it's just false. And so much of that comes from ignorance and a lack of education because our school system really doesn't teach the realities of both our history and our current day struggles with racism in Canada. And while this book focuses on the racism and oppression of Black people in Canada, it does also mention here and there racism towards Indigenous peoples, which is also a big blind spot for a lot of Canadians. And we, of course, also have issues with racism for people of other races that aren't Black or Indigenous. And I just think it's really important that Canadians not only learn more about racism within the context of what's happening in the United States and what has happened in the United States in the past, but that we look at our own history and our own present and acknowledge that our country is not without blame, that our country is not without fault, and that there's a lot that has to be done right here at home to end systemic racism. So this is another book I highly recommend. I give it 5 stars. It is definitely dense. It might take you a while to get through it. It's definitely a book that I'm going to be rereading and taking notes, but I feel like I learned so much more in reading this book than I ever did in school about Canada's history with racism towards Black people. So those are all the books I read in July. As I said, this month was a bit of a harder month for me as far as reading, but I do think I still did a pretty good job of getting through a number of the books that I had selected for myself. And now it's time to share with you the books that I am hoping to read in August. So as I mentioned, there are a number of books that I am pulling forward from July and hoping to finish in August. So I am continuing to read Sapiens. As I have mentioned in the past, I'm listening to this one with my husband, and we're only listening to, maybe 10 to 15 minutes at a time while doing dishes or making dinner every couple days. So it's very slow going, but we're really enjoying it. So I'm just letting myself go slow and enjoy the process of listening to it with my husband. I will also be continuing to read Les Fiancées de l'Hiver by Christelle Dabo. As I mentioned in last month's video, this is 100% going to be slow going because this is a book written in French for people who speak French as their first language and has a more lyrical writing style. So for me, as someone who speaks French as a second language and has not been speaking French regularly for the past decade or so, it's definitely a little slower going. It's getting easier the more that I read, the more I immerse myself in it, but I'm not reading it as fast as I read in English, so that book, again, I'm taking it slow and steady. It's going to take me as long as it takes me, and that's that. I will also hopefully be finishing The House of Sticks by Derek Kungskin. This is an arc that I was given from NetGalley, and this book is being published in August. So I'm hoping to finish this very soon. I'm really enjoying it so far. It is a adult sci-fi, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm also bringing forward a couple books that I didn't manage to start in July. So those are The Conductors by Nicole Glover and A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. In addition to those books that I am bringing into August from July, I also have some new selections for August that I'm really excited about. A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. The standalone sequel to Becky Chambers' The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. This is the story of Lovelace, a former ship's artificial intelligence who was woken up in a body following a total system shutdown and reboot and has no memory of her life before. She makes friends with Pepper, an excitable engineer who's determined to help her learn and grow. Together, Pepper and Lovey will discover that no matter how vast space is, 2 people can fill it together. All Systems Red by Martha Wells. On a distant planet, a team of scientists are conducting surface tests, shadowed by their company-supplied droid, a self-aware sec unit that has hacked its own governor module and refers to itself, though never out loud, as Murderbot. Scornful of humans, all it really wants is to be left alone long enough to figure out who it is. But when a neighboring mission goes dark, it's up to the scientists and their Murderbot to get to the truth. Wandering in Strange Lands by Morgan Jerkins. Between 1916 and 1970, 6 million Black Americans left their rural homes in the South for jobs in cities in the Northwest and Midwest in a movement known as the Great Migration. But while this event transformed the complexion of America and provided Black people with new economic opportunities, it also disconnected them from their roots, their land, and their sense of identity. In his fascinating and deeply personal exploration, Morgan Jerkins recreates her ancestors' journey across America, following the migratory routes they took from Georgia and South Carolina to Louisiana, Oklahoma, and California. Incisive and illuminating, this is a timely and enthralling look at America's past and present, one family's legacy, and a young Black woman's life, filtered through her sharp and curious eyes. The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, seamlessly blending classic horror and a dramatic narrative with sharp social commentary. The Only Good Indians follows 4 American Indian men after a disturbing event from their youth puts them in a desperate struggle for their lives. Tracked by an entity bent on revenge, these childhood friends are helpless as the culture and traditions they left behind catch up to them in a violent, vengeful way. Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. Luke O'Donnell is tangentially and reluctantly famous. His rockstar parents split when he was young, and the father he's never met spent the next 20 years cruising in and out of rehab. Now that his dad's making a comeback, Luke's back in the public eye, and one compromising photo is enough to ruin everything. To clean up his image, Luke has to find a nice, normal relationship, and Oliver Blackwood is as nice and normal as they come. But the thing about fake dating is that it can feel a lot like real dating, and that's when you get used to someone. Start falling for them. Don't ever want to let them go. And my book club's book selection for August, which actually hasn't been decided at the time that I'm recording this, but it will be by the time that I'm editing this video. So I will insert whatever book my book club members have voted for here. This will be the final book that I'm reading in August. Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. This classic madcap farce about mistaken identities, secret engagements, and lovers' entanglements still delights readers more than a century after its 1895 publication and premiere performance. Cicely Cardew and Gwendolyn Fairfax are both in love with the same mythical suitor. Jack Worthing has wooed Gwendolyn as Ernest, while Algernon has also posed as Ernest to win the heart of Jack's ward, Cicely. When all 4 arrive at Jack's country home on the same weekend, the rivals to fight for Ernest's undivided attention, and the Ernests to claim their beloveds, pandemonium breaks loose. Only a senile nursemaid and an old discarded handbag can save the day. Again, I tried to pick books from a variety of genres and written by authors of a variety of experiences. So I'm really looking forward to this month. I did try to pick a couple more books that were maybe, hopefully, going to be a little bit more lighthearted because I really did struggle with reading in July. Part of that being that I did read quite a few books that were quite intense and dark. So I still have some of those books in there, but I'm hoping that some of the more lighthearted things are going to help me out a little bit. I also have 3 sci-fi novels in there because for me, sci-fi is one of those genres that even if it is dark and intense, it tends to be a bit more enjoyable for me. It acts as a bit more of escapism for whatever reason. So it is one of my favorite genres. So I do have a couple more sci-fi in there to hopefully help me pick up my reading again this month. And I'm really looking forward to all of the selections for August, both the ones that I've already started that I'm excited to see how they turn out and the ones that I haven't started yet. So those are all the books I read in July and the books I'm hoping to read in August. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm really grateful that a number of you seem to like these bookish videos because I'm really loving reading more this year. It's been such a great experience. I'm recording. I'm trying to finish my video. I know. I'm almost done. Can you wait? Okay, thanks, buddy. So that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like. That really helps me out. And let me know down below if you have a book recommendation for me, or let me know a book that you're currently reading or that you've finished that you really enjoyed. I love chatting with you about books in the comments. Of course, also, if you're interested in reading this month's book club selection along with my book club on Patreon, check us out. There's a link in the card and in the description box down below. Not only do you get to be part of the exclusive book club, but you also get every single other reward from every tier on my Patreon. So it's kind of a great deal, if you ask me. There's a lot of rewards there. So I'm gonna go now before I ramble your ear off. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye, friends. I want to take a moment to thank my patrons for their support. Extra special thanks to our newest patrons, Madeleine, Mariel, Elizabeth, Lauren, Sabine, Caitlin, Jessica, Julia, and Carmen. Welcome all of you to the squad. We are so excited to have you. If you at home want to join the squad, especially if you want to join the book club, feel free. There's a link in the card and in the description box down below. We would love to have you. If I say goodbye, the nation learns to move on. It outlives me when I'm gone. Like the scripture says, everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. Be safe in the nation we've made. I want to sit under my own vine and fig tree, a moment alone in the shade, at home in this nation we've made, one last time. I love Hamilton! Okay, that's it. Bye-bye.